Hi, I'm Tom, the director, editor, and whatever of Legend of King Kong, and I'm here with Christian Jessup.
Hey everyone, I'm Christian Jessup. I'm the composer for The Legend of King Kong. Happy to be here.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming to get to the point where anything is sort of released of this thing, but I guess I'm happy more or less that things are more rolling to the point where I can be like, here's this thing that I made and Christian done the music for. And some of the comments I've received from this thing has been like, I've given a new sort of appreciation for what King Kong is, or especially the original at this point with part one.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always nice once you've finally finished a portion of something to be able to kind of sit back and enjoy it instead of just be working on it 24/7. I know in the moment, whenever you're working on something, it can almost get to be like it's all you're thinking about. And so you almost don't have the time to take a step back and enjoy it. So it's always nice, once it finally released back in March, it was nice to be able to sit back and be like, wow, we actually did this. This looks really great all put together. And like you said, people have really seemed to enjoy it.
Yeah, it's weird hearing you say that. The part one came out in March. It seems now it seems like it was so long ago that that whole bit of part one happened, but now it's escalated to trying to do the other bits.
Yeah, it's a process for sure. But gosh, I'm trying to think. We've been in contact for a long time because I know this has been, you've been thinking about making this for several years, right?
Yeah, it's been quite a while. I've been thinking of trying to do something about King Kong, but then it's taken a while to get to the point where I've got everyone together, everyone interviewed, you doing the music, poster work and everything, and then me getting all my stuff together and just do it, get on with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's good. It's fine. I'm glad it's finally got to a point, like I said, where it's rolling out.
Absolutely. I loved you opening with this archival footage of the Academy Awards.
Yeah, I thought when I found this Academy Awards bit, I really thought it's a great opportunity to just sort of place the audience into who this man was, just really quickly. That's who Merian Cooper was, sort of like light-hearted, sort of, and he's getting the awards he needs for given what he's done.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then it was great when, it was great when I found out about this guy John, because it was just a complete fluke that I found him. I just put something on some random King Kong Facebook page, and then he messaged me saying, "Oh yeah, I'm related to Merian C. Cooper, the director of King Kong." And I was like, "All right then, can I interview you?" And here we are.
That's so awesome. I thought John's interviews here really helped set a lot of background and made it a lot more personal too. Like it wasn't us just finding random people to interview. Like you interviewed someone related to him, which is so cool.
Yeah, it was a weird situation, sat there talking to him, because it was sort of like, I don't want to gush too much. I don't want to be like your great uncle was this such amazing director. Like he made so many classic films and so much. He done so much for the industry with Technicolor and stop motion work and everything. But yeah, he was just such a nice guy to sort of sit down and talk to. I think we talked to him for just about an hour. And I mean, all the older gentlemen in this, like Steve Vertleib and Jack Polito, who was in it for a little bit in this one, but they talked for ages about King Kong, and you can really see that that's their passion. The King Kong, the original King, is their passion. I mean, I love the film, but I'm the sort of every film I love, the sort of film in general. But they seen King Kong is really their sort of like strong point in everything.
I think that's what's really special here is you can really tell in these interviews how much these people care. Like you said, passion's the perfect word because everyone here just really loves the character and loves the story of how this came to be. I know I really focused on using mallets, like some xylophones. I have some vibraphones in the score here. It was a little hard because King Kong, is such a larger than life character, a very like aggressive character, a monster, because you associate with the monster movies. But with a documentary like this, you don't want the music to always be harsh and aggressive. So a lot of this part of the score, I was using these softer mallets because it still has that percussive driven quality that I might would associate with a character like Kong, but it keeps it a little softer, a little more mellow than necessarily going full out monster movie the whole time.
Yeah, your music seemed to really sort of elevate quite a lot of parts of the documentary, because I think there's the bit right at the end with Steve Vertlive when he's talking about he met Marion Cooper's wife, and then it says for Marion at the end. I think the music really helped sort of gets your emotions going, because I mean that's the point of music, to sort of get you involved and get you in places, especially in film, to get sort of tug at your heartstrings, sort of be like, you have to cry at this bit, you have to laugh at this bit, be scared with this bit. But yeah, it was definitely your music's definitely helped the documentary along.
I appreciate that. It was really fun writing for that part.
Yeah, I mean, this is really quite an interesting story. Well, I think it's interesting, but I don't know if anyone else will or not. But it's this guy, Jack. He's I first contacted James Rolfe, who's the angry video game nerd on YouTube. He's been around for so many years since YouTube started, really. And I said, because I know he's really into like Hammer horror, like Dracula's and everything, and he's into King Kong and Planet of the Apes. And I said, I'm doing this documentary. I've got a couple people on board. Do you want to do it? And obviously he's sort of a higher person. He sort of said, I'm really busy at the moment. So I was like, oh, all right, fine. But then he said, there's someone else on YouTube called Big Jack Films, and he might be able to help. And then this is Jack Buchanan here talking about The Lost World. And surprisingly, I was quite surprised how much he actually knew about King Kong. And he's quite featured quite a lot, because he gave a lot of information about certain things what other people didn't.
Yeah, I noticed he contributed a lot to this documentary in the interviews, and you're right, he seemed to know a ton about it. And also I really just loved the background in this section, because obviously, any movie fan worth their salt has seen the original King Kong, but I wasn't necessarily familiar with films like The Lost World, so it's kind of cool to see the progression of, oh wow, you can kind of see the early hints of the filmmaking techniques, the story archetypes. You can really see it all starting back even sooner than Kong, and that wasn't a part of the story I was even familiar with.
Yeah, I think that's the thing I wanted to try and show in a way with this, is that a lot of people nowadays, they know film history to a certain extent, but it gets to a point where they stop and like, oh, King Kong from the 30s, and that's where it started. But no, there's a long line of things that have had to happen before to get to that point of, we can do this. I mean, like all the Avengers films now, you can say all the original Spider-Man films and Blade, Ghost Rider, all the 2000 stuff, that all had to happen before Disney started messing around with the Marvel stuff. And now it's got to the stage where everyone knows that. But now with King Kong, everyone knows King Kong, but they don't know what happened before to get to the point where he's world famous.
Exactly. And I mean, that's what's special about this entire project, is just having the opportunity to really do a deep dive into this character start to finish and see the history.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to do like a more of a proper deep dive. I know it's a deep dive in a way, but I would rather do, or like to do more of a proper look into it. I mean, this is the best I could do at this moment, because it was sort of, this started out when the pandemic was sort of in the middle, and I couldn't actually go out interview people when I don't have the money to go to America and what have you, do all that. But it would have been great if I could go and visit people like Steve Vertlive and go see him in person and do like a fly on the wall type, go around his house, visit him, and go in his own little world sort of thing.
Right.
But obviously, that's something I would love to do with those sort of people. But at this moment of time, it's not really it's not really possible. But
no, of course. But I mean, it turned out as good as it could, and that's like the beauty of technology is you were able to get all these interviews with people that you might not have otherwise been able to. So I mean, in a weird way, it really worked out that you and I were able to collaborate overseas. You were able to interview all these people across the world. So I like that aspect of it a lot.
Yeah, it was weird because I mean, like you said a bit earlier on, we've been sort of texting each other and what have you for so long,
Mm-hmm.
and it's sort of just I don't really remember that time where I didn't know who you were, sort of thing. Like
Yeah.
like the way I found John, who's speaking now, is I sort of just said something on a Facebook chat thing, and then you popped up saying, I've done this, this, and this. I can do it if you want. And I said, just show me what you got. And then here we are today, 2 or 3 years
Yeah.
after we first talked. And
Yeah, it's been
made a
quite a
whole album.
while. Yeah, it's been quite a while. And I remember, even though it's been that long, pretty much as soon as we started talking, I was writing demos. I sent you a demo like only a few weeks after we first chatted about the project. And then it went a long time where it was just you were having to edit, find more interviews. And then when you finally reached back out and you were like, we're finally ready to actually score this, I was like, let's get to it. So yeah, I've even been writing music for this for a couple of years now because I started writing pretty much as soon as we talked on like working on demos, like a main theme for Kong. And that kind of helped too because, over a few years, my style evolved, my thoughts on the documentary evolved a little bit. And so that really helped me explore the character.
Yeah, I think with the music, I really wanted to have something or find someone who could really sort of do the music well, because obviously the music for King Kong is so iconic. With even with every variation of King Kong, the music sort of really in your face. So I really wanted that person or that sort of song theme to be really good. And luckily you were there and you presented yourself to me, and I'm so glad I actually got you in my grasp to be like, do this.
I appreciate it. Yeah, no, I loved getting to do it. Some of it's a more traditional, like in the background minimalist score, but a lot of this gave me the opportunity to do a more traditional score that you don't hear very often in modern films anymore. So that was really a fun chance to, play around with old school, scoring that someone like Max Steiner would have done, because that's not something that people write much for anymore, but it was something that fit really well in here.
Yeah, I mean, with John talking now in the documentaries, he's talking about Chang, and I'd never heard of Chang before he spoke about it, and after I interviewed him, I went and found a copy, watched it, and it is actually a really cool silent film. Merian Cooper and schoedsack made the two creators of Kong, and the way he talks about it is amazing, because he talks about it that Merian Cooper told him all these stories of how he made Chang, and like he sort of strapped a camera to a thing and chased the monkey down in the forest, and it was like just the inventiveness of Merian Cooper, the way John says it, the inventiveness of him.
It's remarkable. I mean, obviously, you're not going to trick anyone into thinking these are modern effects, but how good this stuff looks, films from 100 years ago, it's incredible because, like you said, just the inventive techniques that they were forced to come up with because they didn't have CGI, they didn't have modern special effects. They did some really cool work with puppets, with stop motion, with practical stuff that we don't see done anymore today, but that looks really good on here.
Yeah, with I think King Kong gets lumped into the obviously monster genre, and things like the original Frankenstein and Dracula, they're not particularly scary today.
Right.
They got an eerie feel to them, and the atmosphere is amazing. But when they first came out, they must have been like the most terrifying film, like the original Nosferatu. So even some of that's quite creepy. Some of the imagery of Nosferatu the vampire, Count Orlok, some of that's quite creepy today. And just think of how scary that would have been when you first saw that. And as well as with King Kong, how weird and astounded people must have been by looking at this massive gorilla. But obviously now you can tell it's fake, and even with new CGI today, it's sort of like you know it's not real. But then I think films like Paranormal Activity and that when they're coming out now, they're scary to us now, but to like what happened with the original Dracula in a 30 more years or so, those sort of films aren't going to be scary anymore. So they have to create new films what are going to be even scarier than The Conjuring and things.
Yeah, absolutely. We're always scared by what's new, I guess. And so because that was new at the time, I can only imagine how terrifying and realistic that must have looked. That's a great comparison though to like think about what scares us now or what looks realistic to us now. That's how that original King Kong, that's how these films felt to the audiences back then.
Yeah, it is really amazing how certain things have carried on, like King Kong, the original King Kong. When you say King Kong, people know who that is. But it's amazing how certain things have sort of carried on and had a legacy and a legend. But other things just sort of get left behind, and it's sort of like, why did this thing get carried on, but this other thing didn't? Like the Lost World, the original Lost World. I mean, that obviously has its history and people know about it, but it's not as well known. When you say the original Lost World, people are like,
Mhm.
"What's that?" But when you say the original King Kong, they're like, "Oh yeah, I know, big monkey up the big building," which kind of frustrates me in a way because it's like, I know it's a bit of a snobby to say this, but it's sort of like you know that, but you don't know the if you like King Kong, you can go back and a bit further and look at that.
Yeah, it really is fascinating to see what sticks in the public mind. And like you said, there's just no way to know. Like some things that you think would be smash hits are not. And then other things that you take a chance on, for some reason, they stick around. Like King Kong's had countless films, and here we are 90 something years later, and he's still just as present in pop culture.
Yeah, I mean, I love the music you did whilst playing over the Spirit of Steve. Like it's really sort of slow and sort of calm. When he's talking about someone he adores, someone he's loved for making films, music, and he's meeting the daughter and husband, and it's like it just really complements the scenes. Like multiple times throughout the documentary, your music really complements what's being said with people.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I definitely tried to take care to where I was matching the tone of what they were talking about, you know.
Yeah, I mean, this is about nearly about 20 minutes in to this documentary, and it's only just really getting into King Kong. But I felt like
Right.
it needed to have that just the bit, like I've said the bit before, just to sort of say it needs the explanation of who people are and what they did, and then they got to King Kong.
Exactly. It's almost like you need that context of like where it all came from in order to really appreciate it. It didn't just King Kong didn't just come out of nowhere. These people had been building up to this their entire careers.
Yeah, it's another comparison you could say. It's like George Lucas with Star Wars.
Yeah.
Like he's done THX and he done American Graffiti and everything. And his inspiration for Star Wars were like Flash Gordon, all the space opera films, obviously with the crawl at the beginning. But then he's all the Akira Kurosawa films and all the samurai stuff and the westerns, and you can see that in A New Hope.
Yeah.
You can see all the Japanese and Western films put into that. But then once you know that, you see it and you're like lightsabers, Han Solo, you sort of get it.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you couldn't separate Star Wars from those influences, like because that's what makes it what it is. And it's the same way here with Kong.
Yeah. And I think it's really interesting here, Bruce Valanche. It was great to actually get him on it. But he's talking about well, multiple people did this. They're talking about when they first saw King Kong. Obviously, they saw it years later, but they just saw it on TV, and it was just played over and over again on TV in the 70s and 60s. And it's weird, just nowadays you don't get that. You don't get that same feeling of like, oh, this is on TV. Now you can just watch whatever you want whenever you want to. But with that, he was saying it was just shown over and over again on this one channel in the evenings, and that's how he watched it. Like all the old Dracula and Frankenstein films, they were only shown at a certain time on one channel. But now you search up the original Dracula, download it, get the disc, just watch it on Netflix or whatever. It's everywhere.
That's a good point. Like, you really don't have that phenomenon anymore of like, well, this is what's on TV, so this is what we have to watch. We have so many more choices now, which is a good thing, but also I do wonder how that may contribute to, some films like this that might have stuck with people just because that's what was on TV.
Yeah.
I was going to say, this music that's playing right now, this was like the first thing I wrote for your documentary. This was part of that original demo I sent over. And so I worked this like chord progression and this like phrase over and over again.
Yeah, like I said, I really love the music that plays in certain places, and it's just the way it plays out is great. But I'm still amazed that some of the people I've actually managed to just grab. And I've emailed them, messaged them on Facebook and various places and saying, this is what I'm doing. Do you want to do this for free? And they just sort of said, yeah, fine, yeah, we'll do it. And it's like what the guy just spoke, Lee, he does the voice for King Kong in the latest Netflix stuff. And it's like, you're working voice actor right now. You're probably really busy, but you gave an hour of your time to do this. And I'm just really grateful for some of the people who actually did talk to me, because some of them, it took a while to reel them in because they agreed to it. But then it took them a while to get to the place where, yeah, I've got a free couple hours, I can do it. But that's how things go sometimes, I guess.
Of course, yeah, it's always hard to find these people's time, but that's the great thing, is if they can find the time to be a part, these people, they love what they do and they love talking about this. So I'm really grateful that so many people were willing to contribute.
Yeah, I don't think I know he's not in this part one, but I think he's gonna be in the fourth part, final part, because that's the Monsterverse stuff. But then you've got Sean Genders. He done the make some of the makeup on Kong Skull Island, and just recently I found out he did Tom Hanks makeup in the new Elvis film.
Really?
And because he's posting on it on his Instagram, and it's just like, that's cool then. Tom Hanks now, and I've talked to you, and it feels weird because I feel like I've got some sort of, well, I don't know him personally, but I feel like I've got some sort of personal connection to him because I talked to him for about 40 minutes on Zoom, and it feels like I sort of know him a little bit. So I'll get that kick out of it, sort of thinking, oh no, you worked with Tom Hanks, cool, I'll work with you as well. So
now you're all connected. Exactly. Yeah. And even like, I think he was briefly at the beginning of this, TJ Storm, getting to talk to him too. Like you really were able to talk to so many people that have really been a key part of this film franchise.
Yeah, it is amazing how many people I did get in this one thing, but then looking at how many people I did eventually message out of everyone who didn't say yes or didn't get into it, it was like some of the people I messaged and they sort of said, oh, we don't have time, or they didn't message back at all, where it was like, I'm so close to getting someone else who I can like mark it off of, saying, oh, this person's in it, you got to watch this. Like I nearly got Faye Ray's daughter in it for one, but she never replied. I sent a message and added her on Facebook, but she never communicated back. And it was like, fair enough, but it would have been so cool to have her and John in the thing, and that would be another connection. But it's really frustrating because then you've got other people who worked on Skull Island as well, some of the actual proper actors from that. I mean, we've got maybe one or two extras who played the tribes people in Skull Island, but I was so close to getting, I forget his name, but one of the crew members in the, like, who go to the island. And if I had just had him, that would have been enough for me to be like, okay, I've done it, cool, you're in it. But I mean, I'm glad of everyone who's in it, but
absolutely,
there's some people I would have loved to have in it, but things don't work out sometimes.
Yeah, I'm sure it's one of those things where for every one person that's in this, you probably reached out to 10 more that didn't respond.
Yeah, I mean, that Jack Polito, he gave me, when I talked to talked to him for about 3 hours, and that was it. It went on for quite a long time, 3 hours. I could have watched Lord of the Rings or something in that time. But then saying that, he gave me an old email for Peter Jackson, and I was like, do you have some sort of contact to Peter Jackson? Because in part 2, he talks about he knows Peter Jackson and he went to the premieres for Kong 2005 and everything. And I said, do you have actually any contact with Jackson anymore? He said, not really, but I have an old email. I used to email him. And I said, can I have it if you don't mind me? He gave me the email, but it was like a really old email he used when he first done Lord of the Rings and Kong. So that was mid 2000s. So I wasn't surprised I got no reply back from that email from the 2000s. But I thought it's worth a try because it was I think it was his wife's email or something, because it had like Wingnut Films on it. That's his production company, and I thought, if he replies, just even anything,
Yeah,
that would have been great.
So close.
Yeah,
I loved here getting to hear about Max Steiner because he really is such an influential part of Hollywood history, and I mean, really like the father of film scoring as we know it. You know, without him, you don't really get the music of John Williams, and without John Williams, you don't get to where music is now. Because yeah, like he's explaining right now, like Max really was the first one that said like, hey, we should put music in movies that isn't just like a band is playing on screen. Let's just have music playing to add emotion to this. And so I loved getting to hear some about it here, and it was special to be able to write music while they're talking about, you know, the background of film music.
Yeah, I think people like Max Steiner and John Williams are the new sort of legends of composing now, because there's just the music of John Williams. There's so many like noteworthy themes he's done. You know, Jurassic Park, E.T., Indiana Jones, Star Wars, and the list just goes on. And it's just like, how did one man just do everything? And like Max Steiner, he sort of, like you said, he started it, like music and playing while scenes are happening. And it's just like, it's weird thinking back then that didn't exist, because it's so just normal, and yeah, that's how it should be done now.
Yeah, like it's just such a normal part of film now that it's crazy to think that there was a time where that didn't happen. But yeah, I mean, he was a legend at the time. I wish more people still knew his name. But yeah, whenever a few minutes ago you flashed up his films like Gone with the Wind, The Searchers, obviously King Kong, it's like this dude was doing so much for music. And I do hope when people look back in a few hundred years that like he's one of the names that we remember, because he was a big influence for me and obviously a big influence for this.
Yeah, I think it's sad that so many people like that are just forgotten, because I'm even like Merian C. Cooper, who made King Kong, he's forgotten. When you say King Kong, that's King Kong. People just think big gorilla, but then they don't think of the man who created King Kong. And that's what I wanted to show. There was actually real people who made this big gorilla.
Yeah.
But there you go. So yeah, like hopefully it is shined a light on some of those people who did make the films that we all love now.
Yeah, I really do think that's probably one of the most important things that came out of this. And like I told you, obviously I was familiar with the character of Kong, loved the classic films, even loved the newer films, but actually getting to hear these people's stories and remember these people's names, and like now I know the people behind the scenes that were able to bring this to life. And I think that's so important that we do remember them and remember their contributions.
Yeah. Even with what John's saying right now, he's talking about just the creation of King Kong with Cooper and Schoedsack, saying we should put him up on that building up there when they're in the office and they look out the window. It's like the Empire State Building, which was, like you said, it's being built at the time. We should just put a big monkey on top of there and see if planes can shoot him down. And that is just like, what? How do you just come up with a random idea like that on the spot, and then producers and that come up and like, yeah, do it. You can do that. It's just like, how did they actually manage to just get away with saying we need a big gorilla on a building? He gets shot down by an airplane, and that's our film. A cool concept, and obviously an amazing film, but it's like you just want to talk to them and really pick at their brains and sort of be like, but why a big gorilla? I just want to know why.
That was such a great story though, because it's cool just to get a glimpse into their mindset. Because yeah, it's like, where did you come up with that? How did you come up? Like, why? But yeah, I loved hearing that story.
Yeah, this is another part that it talking about talking about the people who made it. Obviously, with Fay Ray, their personal, well, not sort of more personal stories of the making of the film, and that's one of my favorite parts. Even though Jack wasn't actually there when they made the film, but it's still nice he knows these stories, what make the documentary overall feel more personal, and just like,
Absolutely.
yeah, and like John there is adding on to the personalness of the story.
Yeah, the transition to John was great because they were saying the same thing there, and I love seeing that like Carl's character is kind of based on Cooper in a way. Like that's a fun like thing to look at and be like, oh, I could kind of see that.
Yeah, there's just so much in this documentary that you could just explore that one element. Like you just said there, the director and one of the characters in the film are just so close. They're like just the same person, and just that one small story could just be expanded into one thing. I mean, this is like an hour and 20 minutes, but just that one small thing could be just like 40 minutes to an hour, just exploring that one thing of how close Cooper was to the character in the film.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's what's kind of funny is, I mean, gosh, by the time all four parts of this release, it'll probably be 5 hours of content about King Kong, and even then, we're just barely touching the surface. Because yeah, we could stop at any one of these interviews and any topic that they touch, and just spend an entire hour on that.
Yeah, that was the hardest thing for me to do with this. Is sort of,
Yeah,
I knew I wanted to do something King Kong, but it was like, but what do I do with King Kong? Because you could do what this bit part one's about, just sort of the basic story of the 30 stuff, but then you've got the remakes, and that's an interesting story how the 70s one came about, and then Peter Jackson's epic reimagining. Then you've got all this new CGI MonsterVerse stuff, and then you've got all the Japanese stuff as well.
yeah,
And it keeps going and going and going. And then you've got things like Rampage and Donkey Kong, what have taken inspiration. And then you've got like the Simpsons episodes where Homer's King Kong. It's all these inspirations, what all dealt with in part four as well. But it's like there's just so much to try and put into one thing. What I tried to do and do like a 2-hour film, but then I just thought there's too much to do, and then I started getting all these interviews, and then the film just sort of went from 2 hours to 3 hours to 4 hours to 5 hours to 6 hours, and I was like, I can't do that. This can't be one film. This can't be one documentary. It is one documentary, but it can't just be one singular thing. It has to be cut up so it doesn't feel like I've gone way too overboard. It has to be cut up into segments and chapters and episodes to be like, this is the documentary. It's one whole, if you put all the bits together, it's one thing, but it has to be cut up to make it feel less of a chore to watch.
right. You don't want to force someone to be watching like a 4-hour thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love what they're talking about now too, about kind of like the tragedy of that ending, because I do think that's what separates Kong from being just another monster movie. Is it's really like kind of a tragic ending to where you're like, maybe we shouldn't be in complete fear of this character. Maybe we should kind of empathize with this character and like feel sorry for him. And I think that that's really something that all versions of the Kong films have tried to fit that theme in, and it makes it different. People somehow relate to Kong in a way that we might not necessarily relate to a Godzilla or to a Dracula, you know? So, I mean, I think that's a special part, and I liked that they were touching on that just a minute ago.
Yeah, and I think one of the other themes with the original King Kong is sort of like leave things alone. don't mess with nature too much, because if you take something out of nature and put it into another place, it's just things are going to go wrong. You're just going to have a big gorilla running through cities and whatever, and that's shown in every single iteration of King Kong. You take it from one place, put him in another, and then there's just rampages
Yeah.
everywhere. And
yeah, I mean, in a way, the humans are kind of the villains, because the humans in all these stories are the ones that are going to this creature's home and taking it away from it and trying to like profit off of it. So I think that's an interesting spin on what would normally be a normal monster film, and makes it a little bit different.
yeah, it's definitely, when you compare like Godzilla or King Kong, it's definitely like Godzilla's definitely more in your face what it's about, because the bomb
Right.
went off and created Godzilla. But with King Kong, it's more like you have to think about it, think about what it means, rather than Godzilla, because it sort of explains to you the bomb went off, it created Godzilla, and that's sort of like an anti-war sort of don't use nukes. But then with
Right.
King Kong, you actually have to think, well, if they didn't actually bring him back, none of this would have happened.
Right.
It's not necessarily said, but you have to think, yeah, if they didn't do that, then yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, this is a really interesting thing with the spider pit scene, because I mean, like Jack said there's been many recreations, and Peter Jackson recreated it because he had so much money left over because of all the money he had from Lord of the Rings. But is one of those things that it would be so cool to actually have the actual finished thing instead of all the recreations.
All these recreations.
Yeah, and apparently here Jack Polito says that it was actually finished, because so many people say, no, it wasn't finished, it was finished, wasn't finished. But apparently Jack has evidence that it was finished. But he's saying that he was interviewed for a monster paper and they didn't really think it existed, but he knows it did. And it was a sort of a tense sort of thing. But then I got a message off of a King Kong message board from the guy who interviewed him about that. And he said he didn't know Jack didn't like his take on it, because he still believed that the spider pit scene wasn't really, still around sort of thing. But then Jack Polito says, well, it was made, it was there, but it's lost. It is made, but it's lost. We don't have it. But then there's, again, the small bits like that can be expanded into something so much bigger.
Oh yeah, I find that to be such a fascinating topic, that we just have this cool looking scene that, like you said, people have recreated, but like we've just lost the original, because it seems like it really was created, but it's gone, which is wild to think about. But it'd be so cool to go back in time and actually be able to find and preserve that.
And this is like what we talked about earlier with Frankenstein and Dracula, what Bruce Valanche is talking about, exactly what we said, that the people back then first seeing dinosaurs and everything, and like Jurassic Park now, it's like seeing the T-Rex, and it's like, how did they do that? Like the T-Rex in Jurassic Park it's just, you can't say much about it because it's just so flawless. The first time you see him walking over it's just like so good.
It really is, and it's a testament to their skills that any of this still holds up so well, because like that original Jurassic Park, you watch it and those effects still look so good. And for what it's worth, this King Kong, you look at some of these stop motion scenes, like the dinosaur or Kong himself, and it's like, that looks really good, like maybe if this was in color, you could kind of fool someone into thinking it was more modern.
Yeah, and I think over the years they have made colorized versions of Kong. But then once you've seen the original King Kong in black and white, and then you watch the colorized version, it loses that sort of atmosphere of the thing.
Yeah.
I mean, like all the original Universal horror films as well, they've been colorized. But once you've seen the black and white and then you watch the colorized, it just loses everything. It doesn't feel the same. It's still good because the film itself is still well made, but with it being color, it loses that atmosphere.
No, absolutely.
This is one of my favorite points Bruce makes there, saying when you say King Kong, they think of the Peter Jackson one, because that was such a big film when that came out, and obviously they do think of the original, but when you say King Kong, it is Naomi Watts in the hands of Andy Serkis's CGI thing. But that's my take on it, and obviously Bruce Valanche's that same sort of idea of that as well. But I think that's the general consensus with that.
Yeah. And it's funny, Star Wars keeps coming up, but I think it's because it was just another revolutionary change. Because, he's talking here about how George Lucas said Star Wars was probably like the first big progression of that filmmaking technology that had happened since Kong. So it's interesting to see how Kong, in a way, even led to some of the technology that we've been seeing utilized in Star Wars, and now that we get to see utilized in all blockbuster films.
Yeah, and it's funny. Just thought of this, that in the new Disney Plus show, the Book of Boba Fett, in the last episode with the creature, the Rancor from Star Wars, he jumps up on this tall building and hangs off of it, and it's like, is that a King Kong reference, or is it just a coincidence? I don't know. I don't think the creators have actually said, that's
I'd
King
have
Kong.
to hope that it's I'd have to hope it's intentional, because I loved that reference, and it seems like the Disney Plus shows have done that. There've been a few scenes that seem like Kurosawa references, and then that one seems like a Kong reference. And even that, like, think about how many like movies and TV shows have parodied Kong. Like, I think a parody goes to show the power of like how well something's lasted in a memory, and like that scene of Kong like hanging off the Empire State Building, everyone knows that because it's been recreated over and over and over again.
Yeah. King Kong is such a strong character within pop culture. He's one of those characters, I think, that will never actually go away, because you got these sort of characters in pop culture who sort of like come popular and then sort of fizzle out with time. But then King Kong, even with Godzilla, these sort of characters feel like they're gonna stay on longer than they should do.
Yeah, absolutely. This music that's playing right now might be my favorite that I wrote for you for the entire series, just because this, I think, was the closest I got to fitting in with the style of what Max Steiner might have wrote. If I had many, many more years to write, I would have written more in that style, which just goes to show how good he was as a composer, because it took a lot of time and energy just to write this like 4-minute cue. But this is my favorite I wrote, because I think I was really able to like use the instruments and the chords that Steiner would have used. And it's even cool that you were able to put that underneath this scene from Kong, because that really shows how it could have worked. But looking back at things, I wish I could have written more like this, because this is my favorite music.
Yeah, I think that's one of my favorite things to look back on, that those sort of bits where I use your music underneath the films, and it works well with the original King Kong, because it's like you said, what that bit of music played there, it sounds so much like Max Steiner's work, but it's not. It's a whole new score, and it sounds having a score what sounds so similar, but it's not his underneath the film. But I mean, in the later parts, I'm editing the later parts now, and I've edited some of your music into bits like just like that. It's still really cool how it fits together, but it's not doesn't feel as great as that, because the music blends really well with the scene what's there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And one of the understudies was the Chrysler Building. But by the time they started photography on the original, the Empire State Building was constructed.
I mean, this is like a similar point what John Baker said earlier. But just put the monkey on top of there. Just that story is just really out there, and like, how did they just think of just putting a monkey on a building, like a big monkey?
Yeah, and like in a weird way, like he was saying, even as taller buildings are built, even though there's like new icons in the world, like in some weird way, the King Kong almost cemented the Empire State Building as like the icon of New York, just because like even when there's taller buildings, even when there's other stuff built, like that scene just kind of cemented like that building as like the pinnacle, and like that's what's stuck in everyone's head.
Yeah, I mean, I've personally never visited America at all. Yeah, and I would like to go to the Empire State Building, just because of it's the Empire State Building, and secondly, it's basically the home of King Kong. Like, you know, that's like you said, when you think King Kong, you think of the Empire State Building. They just go together because it's hanging off of it and everything. But I think they've got a I mean, I've never been there, but when I'm researching for it, I think they've got like a small interactive King Kong bit at the top somewhere, and they've got like a little King Kong shrine, sort of saying this is one of the most famous films, what was done here, sort of thing. But there you go. That's the only reason I want to come to America. One of the reasons I want to go, just go to the Empire State Building.
Just go to climb the building and then leave. You know, that's all you need.
Yeah.
Whereas in the old days, you had to wait for a film to come on TV, and you might only know this.
I mean, this is another point we said earlier about now we have we can watch anything we want anytime we want, but some classic films you couldn't watch back then. You had to wait for it to be on TV or wait for it to be re-released in theaters or cinemas. But now you can just click on Netflix if you want to watch Jurassic Park. It's probably on Netflix, Amazon Prime. It's one of these somewhere.
A lot of these films aren't really made.
Yeah, absolutely.
Made for love. They're as I say, they're made just for commerce, really, to cash in on something that people love. But yeah, the legacy of Kong will always.
It's just so amazing that, like I said, it's like just over 90 years old, the original King Kong, and it's just so weird when you think of that because it's so nearly out of copyright that when things are out of copyright, that anyone can do whatever they want with it. And you know, when they're out of copyright, it's like it's reached a point of popularity and iconicness that it can't be touched, and whatever birthed that in the first place, it is the best. You got to think, like you said about the Wizard of Oz and things like that. The original Wizard of Oz, it can't be touched. There's so many different variations of it, but it can't be touched. That first Wizard of Oz film was so magic, whether it be in black and white, then door opening, it's all in color. Just that amazement of just that one scene and many others after that is, like I say, just can't be touched.
Yeah, absolutely. And really, like, it says a lot to the film, whether it's something like Wizard of Oz or whether it's King Kong, that it's had that much of a lasting impression, then it can't be touched, you know? And as much as, like, I absolutely love Peter Jackson's King Kong film, but as much as I love it, whenever I think of like the definitive version of King Kong, it's always this one. Like like you said, it can't be touched just because there's something special about that original, that everything just came together perfectly to make this lasting icon in cinema. And I also just think it's fascinating because film as an archetype isn't that old. You know, it just around the turn of the century, the 1900s. So, I mean, we've really only had 120 years of film, and it's really brand new. And so people are still kind of discovering the best ways to use it. And so it's fascinating to think that that really happened at like the advent of cinema, like 20 years into even knowing how to make movies, this was made. And I think that's really cool that it's had that lasting power, even though film was pretty much brand new as a medium then.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, the one thing that I felt like it was a shame with this documentary was the Son of Kong bit, because not many people actually talked about it. Because I asked questions about it, but they sort of said, "Yeah, I saw it," and that was it. They sort of like they saw it, they didn't mind it, but they just forget it exists. And to be honest, it's not the greatest film. Like they say here, it was so rushed because the success of King Kong, they just wanted the next thing with the King Kong character or with another big gorilla, and there's so much of the effects in it are just as good, but the whole plot is like, what's the point? We're just going back to the island, finding another gorilla thing to fight another dinosaur, and that's it. And then the gorilla dies again. It doesn't seem like it's worthwhile. I think that's why not many people talked about it, because it's sort of like they watch it, it's good enough, but it's not as good as the original.
Yeah, and like you said, it's impressive that the effects still look as good, but from a story perspective, it doesn't quite sound like it had any purpose other than just they wanted to follow up on the popularity. There was a lot that surprised me in this documentary, but I thought I knew the character of Kong, and then they started mentioning Son of Kong, and I was like, I've never heard of this. What is this film? And so then I looked it up, and I was like, I feel like there's probably a reason I haven't heard of this. Nobody really watches it or cares about it.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard rumors, and I don't know how true it is, but the next sort of Kong thing in the MonsterVerse and the new Universal Legendary stuff, they might do a new version of Son of Kong. And I think that might be an interesting way to go with it, because obviously they done the updated version of Godzilla versus Kong, and if they do an updated version of Son of Kong, that might, because they had a slightly different take on Godzilla versus Kong with the new one, because it wasn't Godzilla versus Kong. It was just sort of like they're both good, but they had to sort of defeat the bigger evil. But then with the original one, sort of they were put together to kill one another. But then with Son of Kong now, if they do the new one, it's like how do they do that? Because in the original, King Kong's dead, and then the Son of Kong is obviously his son. But then in the new ones, it's got King Kong's alive
still.
Yeah, and then in every other film from the MonsterVerse, I thought King Kong is the only one of his species left, and and that's nothing. You can go into depth with that, just theories of how that will play out. But I mean, I don't know how true it is, but I mean, I hope it is. It'll be cool to see, but never know.
That'd be interesting. I'm fascinated by the way that there was a Broadway adaptation. Like, talk about a property I never would have expected to see on Broadway. It would be Kong. So I loved seeing this part of the documentary, because I was like, who decided to do this? But I mean, it looks like it was well put together, and like the puppet for Kong looks incredible, but it does just kind of seem like those things where it's like a strange choice to adapt.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if I would just let that bit in or not, because it sort of felt like no one else mentions it at all. But I thought, like you said, you discovered it because you saw him talking about it in this documentary. So I thought it might shine a little bit of light on other stuff, what's based on the original Kong, that might give some more depth to the pop cultureness of the character.
Yeah, and episode 4 goes a lot more in depth into that, but I think that's just yet another example of the lasting impact he's had across everything. Like, yeah, there was a Broadway show. Of course there was, so I think that just did a good job of showing just how wide his impact was.
Yeah. I mean, this another bit here with Steve Vertleib. It's just another personal story of him watching it when he was younger, and just what he's saying with him watching it with his mum, and his mum telling him the stories of this big gorilla in this film. It just really gets you emotional in a way, because it's like this film gives people so much joy, nostalgia, and they love it. Like we said earlier, these older gentlemen, like, they obviously love this genre and love this film, and I think that's why they're great picks to be interviewed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's so important that we have stories like this, because it shows how this convinced other filmmakers that like they wanted to go into film, or that they wanted to like get involved in studying this.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the main reasons I've been inspired to do stuff like this was films like King Kong, and watching them. And I mean, when I was younger, I was never really, I knew King Kong existed, but that was because of the Peter Jackson King Kong. And that was the first version I saw, because it came out at a time where I was growing up, and that was like the biggest film at the time. And that sort of piqued my interest in sort of like, oh, what's this, these monster films. But then I just remember watching more Godzilla when I was younger, because I remember them being on some sort of film channel on Sunday afternoons, and I just used to sit there and laugh at them, because the ones I used to watch when I was younger were the more ones later on, the more goofy ones, the ones what people really don't really think much of. They're sort of like the Son of Godzilla, the ones where just he's flipping about, hitting each other, not really keeping true to Godzilla, but they're still great, they're still fun. But then you got the other Godzilla stuff, what's more serious about climate change and atomic bombs. But I think that's the reason why I've sort of fell in love with film, because I remember watching these great films when I was younger, and they've sort of inspired me later on.
Who have had that experience in their lives, or
Yeah, absolutely. And that really is just so important
Anything
because
that they feel
it's other
they feel
films
is
that
connected
inspire
with.
future filmmakers.
Someone who's a bit different, if you know what I mean, or outcast. So there is a certain degree of
And again,
emotional
again,
connection
it's like sound
there.
like a broken record. And there's another guy talking about him watching it on TV when he was younger.
Yeah.
It's just amazing how this one film has touched the hearts of so many people around the same time.
Yeah, I mean, really, like it's so crazy that all these interviews obviously were separate of each other because they were all over Zoom, but we keep hearing the same comments over and over about how this really impacted them. Like, yeah, I watched this over and over on TV. Yeah, I went to see this in the theaters and was blown away. So yeah, I mean, really, just like that really made such a big difference.
And he's talking about that he wrote a book of Max Steiner, and it was great to get him some of his involvement in the film in the documentary series, because he can actually speak more about in depth of Max Steiner and what he went through. I think he's commented and messaged me about the stuff you've done, and I think I've told you some of the stuff he's done, and it's like it's great. It's a great. I know I didn't do it, you did it, but still, it's a great feeling that someone like that is appreciating what we've done together, put these things together, and he's watching it like he watches King Kong with Max Steiner. He's watching this documentary of my visuals and everything and your music. Is a great feeling.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I it was a little bit nervous whenever I was like watching through so that I could score it, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, he's in this! Like, he's gonna be judging my music." But no, I really appreciated those comments because, yeah, I mean, this was just a passion project for me. I wanted to be able to contribute something and kind of honor the legacy of those older composers in that classic style. So I'm glad that that was appreciated by people that have studied and written about that.
Yeah, I think I've got so many comments and messages about this that people sort of saying that sort of said thank you to me in a way, because it feels like it tapped into their brain, sort of remembering watching it, like the people in the documentary speaking about watching it. It tapped into the viewer's memory of them watching it.
Yeah.
And I mean, your music, I think that's got the greatest love of this project. Your music is brilliant. I gotta say it is, and people seem to really like it.
Well, I really loved doing it.
Yeah.
This Universal, I was never on that attraction, but the photos look terrifying. Like that Kong is
Yeah.
ginormous.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know where it is, but I think I went to a trip to a Universal place once, and I had this picture taken with this big Kong. uh, but it's annoying because I don't know where the picture is. It's somewhere in this house, but I really want to find it. But I remember it so vividly because I was terrified of it. I was scared of it because I had to walk out with my parents and sort of sit in this big palm, and then this big head coming around the corner. But it's like I don't know where that picture is. I would love to look at it again. I mean, it's like this big head on there. Like that's what it was, and it's so it's such, like you said earlier. He's such a scary figure, but throughout the film he's such a lovable character as well. You learn to love him.
Yeah, you get like both of those feelings, and it's crazy that it does that good a job of that. But yeah, seeing like some of the like pictures to scale of these like attractions and stuff with him on it, it like really puts it into perspective of like the film where it's like, what if I saw that in real life? I would be screaming and running the other way.
Yeah, because when you're watching the film you think, oh, he doesn't look that big in the original one, especially in the original one.
Yeah.
Oh, he's big, but he doesn't look that big. But then when you see those big
See those
animatronics in the
pictures.
theme parks, it's like, yeah, he's that big. And then here is sort of tapping into for the first time really about Godzilla, and obviously Godzilla is a big part of King Kong's history, because if it wasn't King Kong Godzilla, I don't think King Kong would have existed. But he would have, but he wouldn't have. The legacy wouldn't have carried on as much as Godzilla's has.
Yeah, it really is interesting because those characters have just become intertwined where they've contributed to the legacies of each other, and now obviously they're in films together as well. But it has been one of those things where because of both of them, the other has continued to stay in people's memories.
Yeah, and this guy here, Nigel, he's talking about the score as well. Just Max Snyder's scores again, and he's bringing up the Universal stuff once again. And what he said, it was like a stage play. Like there wasn't like any music to it. It was literally, you know, actors doing their thing. But then with King Kong, they added the music to that, and it becomes something else.
The kind that we can relate to, whether it's Boris Karloff's Frankenstein's monster or Lon Chaney Jr. as Larry Talbot, who becomes the Wolfman. The creature.
No, it's funny. They're talking more about how relatable Kong is, but yeah, it really is. And I think the music does that too. You know, talking about the music in film, I think in a way, you know, having a film without music might not have given that emotion, but then you have Steiner's score, one telling you to be terrified in certain scenes, but then two adding that like romantic emotion to it in a way, to where you feel sorry for him and you relate to him, just because he's been taken out of his home, he's taken out of his comfort place and been put into this completely new area where he's been attacked.
Of being taken out of a place that's comfortable and being that we know, and being brought into a place that isn't comfortable for us. I mean, there's so many ways that we can relate to King Kong.
Here, Max Steiner coming up yet again, but he really was so important here. And like I said, I just really look up to him, and I think that he's a really underrated contributor here because he really transformed film music with this film.
Yeah, Max Steiner's score really did help along King Kong in so many ways. I mean, it came up early in this documentary, and like we said, that with the early, you know, the early Universal horror films, there's no soundtrack at all. But with King Kong, there was a soundtrack, and it really elevated that situation.
Yeah, I mean, I just think about even like this documentary you mentioned, like the music really helps add emotion and like drive the documentary forward, which I agree with. So I can only imagine if it does that for this documentary. Imagine watching King Kong without music and then adding his music to it. That must have been night and day.
Yeah. And this scene is another one of those scenes. I love your music being implemented into one of the scenes. I mean, this is one of my favorite scenes in the whole film anyway, so I'll put it in there. But with your new music, it adds a whole new element to it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And yeah, that's definitely got some of those like mallets that I was talking about, xylophone, vibraphone in there. Loved using those for this score.
And here again is another personal story of one of the interviewees who knew Merian C. Cooper, or didn't know, but messaged him and sent emails throughout his life before he died. And it's just great to hear all these little bits of history what you wouldn't have known otherwise if you hadn't spoken to him. And that's why I want, it's like someone like Steve there. That's why I want to go actually visit him, see him in person, and go around his house, talk to him.
But yeah, and it's so cool that he like showed you those like autographs and the postcards and the pictures that he has from him. I mean, that's just like a little piece of history right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got some great stories there.
This is one of my favorite stories when he talks about Fay Ray. He opens a Coke can, it goes down him. And it's just like one of those stories that obviously is so personal to him because he loves the film, and meeting the main actress from the film and having such a funny situation happen, it just bleeds into the, you know, just the love for it.
Absolutely. I'm really glad you found a way to incorporate all these personal stories, because that really, like, it's great to hear the history of Kong, but what really makes this special for me is hearing how Kong is special to other people, and to hear these personal stories about how what it meant throughout their life and how their life was impacted by meeting some of these people too.
Yeah, and that's what's carried the legend of King Kong along.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what's carried him along, and that's why he's so iconic and recognizable today, because of all these people who watched it when they were younger. Like Star Wars, that's the big factor of Star Wars, is the nostalgia of it, or just carries it along to the point where you see a picture of Vader or Kong or whatever, and you instantly know who that is and where it's from.
My series of articles on the making and production of King Kong on the cover, and continued for several issues.
And he just again, with just all the stories from Steve, He's just so many different stories about different things. Because when talking to him, I spoke to him for about an hour and 20 minutes, and he's met so many amazing people. He's met John Williams, and John Williams is one of his favorite composers ever. He's one of that's one thing he wanted to do before Steve died, to meet John Williams. So before his death, he wanted to meet John Williams, and he managed to do that. And it's just amazing to hear that he's met one of his heroes. But I mean, I wish I could have a moment like that, meeting someone like John Williams. I've met various people with people with a big name, but I've never met anyone like John Williams who's really given humans the satisfaction of his music.
No, of course. But yeah, hearing his stories was really cool. And yeah, like the fact that he's met so many icons and idols throughout history, and just has stories about that is just incredible.
Yeah, and I've talked through messages on Facebook with Steve as well, and he really does involve himself completely with Hollywood. Because I mean, back in the day, he reviewed films and everything back then. He wrote magazines, he was on TV, he was really involved with everything. And obviously now he's in his older age, he doesn't do that as much anymore. But he still remembers everything, what he said, everything he's written, everyone he's met. And he just spews all this knowledge out of film and Hollywood and people he's met. And you could just literally speak to him for hours and hours. And he's got all these amazing stories that they just keep coming out.
Yeah, I mean, it really is remarkable. And he remembers it in such detail too. He's a great storyteller here.
Yeah. I mean, I have to say, recently on Facebook, I've seen he's had some problems, and he's been through surgery multiple times, and recently, and I just want to quickly say, I hope you're doing well, Steve. Where if you need anything, message me. So I hope you're doing well after your surgeries and everything.
And said that she still got together with Bob Armstrong on a regular basis at that point in 1974.
I mean, again, this is another bit where you can go on and on with the relationship between the cast, because he said something may have gone on between multiple members of the cast, but obviously we'll never know what actually happened because the members of the cast are no longer with us. But it would have been, it's one of those things of, do we really want to know what happened or not? Because it would be fairly interesting in a way to know if something did happen, but then it's you don't want to know because it might taint the actual film. But
yeah, and it is just fascinating because we live in a world now that we know everything about everyone, with the internet, with media, news publications, stuff like that could never be a secret. But back then, there's all this speculation about did something go on with people? We lost the big spider scene. So it's fascinating because stuff like that wouldn't happen to a modern film, but we're stuck now just kind of putting together the pieces from this film from 90 years ago, wondering, what did happen with the cast? What happened to this spider scene that got lost somehow? So it's really interesting trying to piece it together, and like you said, trying to decide how much do we even want to know versus how much do we want to leave a secret.
Yeah, I think back then they didn't really, with the off cuts and behind the scenes sort of stuff, they didn't really care. They didn't really think twice about it because it was we don't need that, throw it away. But now it's why did you do that? Why did you throw that bit away? That might be worth so much money now, and it would be interesting to see and hear the stories of what that was. But we will never know. I mean, with a lot of the stuff, you got the Doctor Who stuff, when that was first coming out, so much of that stuff is lost now because it was no, it's shown on TV once, done.
That's it.
Yeah. This is great because this guy Jack, he made his own King Kong film, and that's about 3 hours. And like he said there, he's a big Kong Godzilla fan, and he tried to smush everything together. into one thing. And this clip here where he's talking with James Rolfe here, Angry Video Game Nerd. That was the only way I could try to actually get the Angry Video Game Nerd in a YouTube video Jack and him did together. I thought I got to have him somewhere because I couldn't actually speak to him. I'll show a video he's in.
Incorporate the video of it. I love it. Love that.
It's crazy.
And I think this coming up is so cool.
Yeah, this is one of the actual surviving fins.
That's me. But the only thing with that is it was so annoying because it's like this clip and the clip earlier on, you see me, but there was no easy way to edit around that because he's showing me a prop and I'm reacting to it. And if he didn't have my reaction, it would come off really weird if he's directly talking to me about a prop he's showing me. So if I didn't have my reaction in there, it'd feel off. Well, to me, it would have.
No, I agree. I think you made the right call there because, like you said, you need that reaction to him seeing it instead of him just like holding it up to the camera. So I think that really helped. But yeah, I thought that was so cool that he had that Stegosaurus.
Yeah. I mean, this ending bit here is sort of like a few of the people throughout this first part of the documentary talking about things they've created or the things they have from the film, what inspired them to do other things. Like Jack, because he made his own film. Steve's got a part of one of the stop motion dinosaurs, and this guy here, Nigel, made an advert out of a radio advert, video advert of it. And it's just great hearing these things they've created because the love they have for the film.
Yeah, I think that was a really good natural conclusion that you found for this, because it's like, all right, we've gone through the history, we've talked to all these different people about its impact, and now we're going to end it by showing, all right, what did that actually leave them with? And like you said, we get to see, all right, I made a film out of this, I have a prop from this, I made this trailer. So it's really, it just brings it all together and made the ending feel like a natural progression of everything that you've talked about so far.
Yeah, and I think, like I said again earlier, it's when you watch part 1 through to part 4, it all together in one timeline without any credits in between, it is just one big 4 or 5 hour film going through. This is the start, this is the end, and it ends with all the inspiration the film has caused and where it is right up to date with the new CGI Universal stuff. And it is really amazing to see how far it's come and how popular it has become in pop culture.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny, I remember I was a little intimidated because, yeah, like you said, we've been talking about this for several years, and when I first signed on, it was supposed to be a movie, but then at some point you messaged me, were like, hey, I think I've got too much for a movie, so now it's going to be like 5 hours, and I was like, wow, I did not sign up for that much music. So I was a little intimidated at first, but it's well worth it seeing the finished project. Like it's good that you were able to keep all this in here.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully if I do something else after this, it'll be a bit more professional. We can get the things running a bit more quickly and smoothly with that one. But, I mean, this is my favorite bit of this whole documentary, when he's talking about seeing Merian Cooper's widow and he's talking about a personal story, the exchange between them and the ending.
Yeah, same. And I think we brought up at the very beginning how like the music and everything came together here, and that was really important to me. Is like, you know, there's music throughout most of this, and some of it stands out a little more than others, but I wanted to make sure that the ending of this especially was such a personal story that it really fit the mood of what he was talking about. So I think this is a good example of a scene where everything from the editing to the interview to the music all really worked together in a good way.
Yeah, I got a message from John Baker, the nephew of Merian C. Cooper, saying when he finished this, he admitted to me he cried a little bit at the end of this because this last story got him.
Yeah,
and like that was my goal. I
mean, it gives me chills. It gives me chills seeing it again.
Yeah, as long as if one person gets emotional through this, I've done my job. But we've done our job. You've got to put all the music together.
Yeah, and I mean, I hope, you know, if anything, the people that all interviewed for this, they now have this lasting memory to help them go on, you know, the people that watch it, hopefully now they have a memory and a history of Kong's character. Like, it's just really good to have this documented, because whether it was the people involved or people hearing this for the first time, like, there's just, it means so much to so many people. And I'm glad we were able to, you know, hopefully capture that emotion and those feelings.
Yeah.
Love that.
Definitely.
I've kept with me all these years.
I mean, I just love that ending sort of beat on there, and then it comes out with Merian Cooper.
Yeah, I thought
yeah.
that was great that you ended it with that. I was like, that
Yeah.
that was a really solid way to do it.
Yeah, I didn't know if it would be a nice addition just to have that. I really like that favorite quote, just to sort of end it off, because the music was getting quieter. I didn't know if to cut the music off, or I thought adding that might give a bit more thing to it, and then it beats again, and title card.
The title comes up. No, I love the editing there, and I appreciate you letting the music play out, because I think it really did help finish out that emotion, and then we have that hard cut to the actual credits coming up.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm so grateful for so many people who helped me along this journey, and the people who interviewed, and yourself, and yeah, everyone who actually helped me. And it has been a great experience to edit this whole thing. And like I said, I'm still doing parts 2, 3, and 4, and they're roughly a little bit over an hour each one of them. So it's getting there. Part 2 is nearly done. Just had to add some bits, and hopefully within the next month, part 2 can come out. But yeah, that's where we're at. Part 1's out. Part 2 is nearly out. So getting there, halfway.
That's exciting, almost there. But yeah, I appreciate you bringing me along for the journey, because it's been great writing music for this. It was cool being able to put the album out on like Spotify and Apple Music. I mean, it's just been a great experience working with you on this. I've loved it.
Yeah, it really is. And before we go, I just really have to thank as well Ian Richardson, who done the poster, because the poster
so good.
Is so good. He's been a family friend for a few years now. And I reached out to him and said, I'm doing this. Do you want to do this? And he said, yeah, sure. And then he came back with that poster, like through various, I think I've posted on Facebook and things, like different variations of it in pencil and everything. And it's just amazing what he does. And I mean, all his artwork, all his comics he's done is amazing as well. And I went to him because I knew how good of an artist he is. And he came up with that, and I thought, there you go. That's the poster, and it's amazing. But it's
I mean, I have friends that literally watched the documentary because they saw the poster and was like, that's a great poster. Where can I watch this? And so, I mean, it was great. Really well done.
Yeah. Well, thank you for joining me on this commentary track, or whatever we're going to call it in the end. But it's been great rewatching it again with you, because I think when we were finishing up the edit on this, we watched it to check things through, but having it properly complete, and then with all the music done and the rest of the parts nearly coming out soon, it's great to have a chat about exactly what it's done.
Yeah, appreciate you having me. It was really good to revisit this and kind of relive through those memories with you, Tom.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, and thank you for listening to the commentary track for The Legend of King Kong Part 1.